Welcome to the Great Basin Seasonal Outlook for May through August. Over the last 30 days, we've seen very warm temperatures over western and southern areas of the Great Basin and cooler temperatures up over interior areas and up over Idaho and Wyoming as storm systems continue to drop out of the north and drop south into the northern and eastern areas of the basin. Precipitation has been generally well below normal in the far south and over western areas and also over parts of Idaho. Storm systems have brought some precipitation to parts of eastern Nevada into Utah and eastern Idaho. In some areas, this precipitation has been near or just above normal for the time of year, but for the most part still largely below normal for the last 30 days. The current snowpack continues to decline across the Great Basin and has now dropped below 70% in parts of the northern areas of the basin and has dropped below 50% over western areas and also over the southern half of the Great Basin. Soil moisture still remained very low across parts of Utah and over the Sierra into western Nevada. And looking at the Evaporative Demand Drought Index, which is a better signature for shorter-term drought or short-term changes in the drought, shows how dry conditions have been around the periphery of the Great Basin in California and the Pacific Northwest, and also down into Arizona. But still southern and western areas of the Great Basin still showing more of a drying trend over the last couple of weeks, and again, conditions further north are certainly doing much better. However, the longer-term drought is still prevalent across the Great Basin. We do have extreme to exceptional drought across much of Utah and all of the southern half of the Great Basin. As you move further north, drought conditions are not quite as severe up across Idaho and Wyoming, but certainly still are showing signs of developing over many areas. So we will be watching northern areas depending on the precipitation over the next coming months to see if that drought changes. Right now, we're not anticipating much change in the drought over the southern half of the region, and still this extreme to exceptional drought will likely be plaguing the area for quite some time. Looking at some of our drought conditions, this is a different way to look at drought. This is our drought time series. This is just for Nevada from 2000 on the left all the way through 2021 on the right, so the last 20 or 21 years. Looking at BLM acres when we have drought conditions, it's very easy to see first where the periods of more significant drought are located, and then where areas that we do not have drought are located. So looking at just BLM land, generally looking at lower elevation, fire areas that are more dominated by fine fuel growth, you can see the areas in black boxes show that our above normal BLM acres burned are typically not in years that we have significant drought. And this is just because we have more moisture for fuel growth. So if we have more fine fuel that's more continuous and higher fuel loading, we have more fuel to carry those fires. However, looking at our higher terrain, looking at that same drought schematic for Nevada, you can see in the blue boxes is where we see our above normal Forest Service acres burned. So again, you can see we are seeing that in areas where we don't have drought, but also when we start to see drought develop over the first couple of years, we are still continuing that significant increase in acres burned just due to the more available fuel, some of the larger fuel that is more significantly dried out, and still probably having some carryover grasses from the years that we didn't have drought. So one other way to look at this is also just more of our notable Forest Service fires. These did not necessarily occur in years that we had above normal acreage, but certainly they were notable in areas of higher elevation, and they were significant despite how large the fires got. And again, you can see quite a few fires here listed. This is just for Nevada. So within the black boxes, noticing that it's when we have significant drought that we're seeing these more notable, larger fires in the higher elevations. So that's something to keep in mind as we continue to move into the fire season, especially for areas over the southern half of the Great Basin. We see similar conditions for Utah, since we do have extreme to exceptional drought across Utah this year in most areas. You can see in the blue boxes, these are again our higher elevation, more notable fires. Many of them are listed below there, but the years outlined in blue, you can see that it's really in times when we do have significant drought that we see these bigger concerns for our higher elevations. These years that we had significant drought in Utah that we did not have really a significant fire season were only times that it only occurred that way because we saw greater precipitation in April and May. So these were wetter years during April and May during periods of drought, and that's likely the reason that we did not see really a high fire season. So looking forward into our April and May into our May and June coming up, we're really not seeing the significantly wetter conditions, at least in a widespread fashion. So we'll likely be very concerned with our high elevations of Utah this year. Looking up into Idaho, the areas in the black boxes are the well above normal acres burned for Idaho. And you can see for Idaho, it's really, again, not in those areas of drought. This is for eastern Idaho. So we do in our higher terrain have more concerns in areas of drought, but it's really some of these non-drought years or more moderate drought years that can be more concerning. And that is the type of year we are looking at for Idaho this year, is expecting more maybe moderate drought, maybe some pockets of severe, but certainly some of our lower elevations to mid elevations will be a concern for Idaho this year. So looking at some of our current ERC charts, in Idaho, the green line shows where we've been all year in relation to the gray line, which is normal, and we've been about near normal in Idaho for much of the year. However, further south, in both Utah and Nevada and the Arizona Strip, we've seen really many periods where that green line is right at the red line, which is our record highs for the period of record. So again, we've been seen very dry periods, and because of drought, our fuels really respond and they really dry out significantly. We have some dips where we've seen some storms temporarily drop our ERCs, but then they rebound right back up once drier weather returns. 10-hour fuel moisture is very low across especially southern areas of the Great Basin, but also much of Nevada that has been largely void of some of the moisture that's moved over Idaho, parts of Utah, and Wyoming. Similar conditions in our 100-hour fuel, or a similar pattern rather, and then similar in our 1,000 hours as well. Still dropping pretty low down in the south and still quite high over northern areas. But again, in Idaho, as we go through the next month or so, while those mid to high elevations dry out, the low elevations that do have some carryover grasses certainly will contribute to fire spread going into the rest of the spring. Current large incidents, really nothing across the Great Basin. We have had green up start across the region, so that along with the recent moisture we've seen has temporarily quieted things down on a large scale, so really just activity in the southwest. So putting everything together, just quickly want to talk about El Nino and La Nina. We are coming out of a La Nina and likely heading into more neutral conditions, which will give some variability to our weather into the summer, but possibly heading into a La Nina towards fall. And this could be significant if it does materialize, because that could be an early end to the monsoon. So that'll be something we'll be monitoring later in the fire season. Looking at the 8 to 14 day outlook, taking us from May 8th through the 14th, generally warm and dry conditions expected to redevelop across the Great Basin. Over the next couple of weeks, we will have storm systems dropping down from the north, kind of catching parts of Idaho, Wyoming, maybe even parts of northern and central Utah, so bringing some relief at times, or at least a downtrend in fire activity, just with some cooler temperatures and even an increase in relative humidity and some showers and thunderstorms. Again, it's the thunderstorms we'll be worried about, even if moisture starts to increase. Certainly that lightning with our drought fuels across Utah especially will be something we'll be watching. The rest of May, again, just warm and dry in the south, and again, those systems kind of clipping the northern eastern edges. As we go into June through August, the outlook is certainly for a more pronounced, strong ridge of high pressure to develop in the southwest. And as hot and as dry as that might be initially, that's really what we need to develop to get the monsoon to develop this year. So you can see in the precipitation, monsoon moisture really starting to at least show some signs in the southwest, and that should push north into the basin on time or maybe even slightly early. But we'll certainly be watching the leading edge of that moisture, because it's usually in those times where lightning increases, and that could happen before the moisture has any effect. So we're still looking for a pretty active early start to the fire season over the southern half of the Great Basin. So putting everything together, our outlook showing our May conditions, we are expecting that above normal threat over the southern half of the Great Basin, especially in the higher terrain. That will be before the monsoon arrives, when we start getting warmer and drier. By June, still expecting pretty significant conditions for fire activity over Utah, and then the eastern quarter or so of Nevada. Again, mainly in the higher terrain, that's the main focus. Once you get on the northern side of this area, up into parts of Elko and northern Utah, some lower elevations that do have some carryover grasses will be a concern in addition to the higher elevations. Then by July, we should start to see that monsoon moisture work its way into the south, and by August, hopefully quiet down the southern areas of the Great Basin. But by July and August, we could see the higher elevation of the Sierra front become more significant for fire activity, just with some drier conditions and a below normal snowpack. So we'll be watching those areas. Also, if the monsoon moisture does develop like we are expecting, areas over the western side of the Great Basin would be on the fringes of the moisture and also the dry lightning. And by August, we do expect that above normal activity again to move up into Idaho, just given our current drought conditions, some of our carryover Fine fuels that we still do have standing up in Idaho will be somewhat problematic as we get later in the fire season. That concludes our seasonal outlook for this month. Check back next month for the latest updates.